Good morning, everybody. I know this was a coffee chat scheduled originally for July 29th, and it's about managing your emotions. So you can imagine my emotions when YouTube said going live for about 20 minutes and it never loaded. So I was staring, talking to myself. But anyway, I'm here. Happy to still chat about the same topic and make sure we can talk about this important concept of how do interviewers kind of manage our emotions before we enter an interview, emotional awareness during the interview, and then even after the interview. So a little bit of coffee this morning to keep us going, keep us hydrated. I also wanted to mention, kind of exciting that a lot of conferences are happening again. So hopefully we see you out in person. This week I have a chance of going to Cleveland, speaking at an HR Star conference for human resource partners. Tony Paishon is going to do another one of these HR conferences coming up soon in San Francisco. For those of you on the West Coast, for you doing organized retail crime investigations, I'll be at the Georgia, the GROC conference in a few weeks. Financial crime investigators, we'll see you at IFCI in a few weeks. Tony's speaking at American Polygraph Association conference down in Florida in a few weeks. So just really exciting to see the amount of different verticals that we're in front of and be able to see all of you in person again. But going back to kind of the primary topic for this week's or last week's coffee break is to talk about the importance of emotional awareness as an interviewer. A lot of times in our classes, we get asked by attendees of how do you kind of manage either being nervous, agitated, or frustrated before you walk in the interview room, or what do you do during the interview when somebody is coming across deceptive or maybe resistant, and it causes you to get a little bit frustrated. And we think about what emotional awareness really is number one, it sounds obvious, but it's being aware of not only your emotions, but the anticipated emotions that the person you're interacting with is maybe going through, and then adapting and pausing and reflecting on how you're going to manage those emotions. And I got just 3 different takeaways for us to talk about that. And the first is this awareness piece. And when you think about being aware that maybe new interviewers or even experienced, if you're going to walk into an interview and you know you're going to be nervous, when we're nervous, you have to think, how does that come across? When I'm nervous, do I, tap my fingers? Am I kind of itching my face? Do I avoid eye contact? And being aware that our nervousness is going to potentially impact somebody else's response could be an issue. We need to be aware of that and try to adapt it. On the same side, if I'm going to walk into an interview and I know I'm already agitated, or maybe I've been working an investigation for 6 months, so I'm frustrated. Maybe the person I'm talking to has done something really offensive, so I'm angry. Being aware that when you enter that conversation, your anger, your frustration, your agitation can come out in your tone, in your physical behavior, in the way you interact with somebody. And if you interact agitated, if you come across desperate or frustrated, again, that's just going to mitigate any type of potential rapport you're going to develop with the subject. So it's being aware of how you're entering that conversation and how it might be displayed to your interviewee. The second piece is being aware of what emotions they might be facing, right? Being aware that it could be embarrassment as they're brought into an office to be talked to by somebody as an investigator. It could be shock. It could be fear. It could be fear of retaliation, fear of consequences. It could be just discomfort. Maybe it's somebody who's interacted with law enforcement before or loss prevention before or HR before in a negative light, and they're nervous about what this conversation is going to enter into. So being aware again of their emotions. Awareness is number one. Number two, if you're somebody, some of these concepts are starting to trigger with you. I've entered a conversation angry, or I've entered a conversation nervous, is looking at past events and trying to determine how did I handle it then? What happened at that point? For me, I know when I first started conducting interviews in the beginning of my career, I was most anxious because I didn't know what I didn't know, meaning I didn't know what's going to happen if. What happens if somebody doesn't give me the information I thought they were going to give me and they steer me in a different direction? What happens if somebody says, I have nothing to say to you? And so when I review past events, I've learned what made me more confident is spending more time strategizing, preparing, and planning. I go back and I think, what I didn't know is what made me the most nervous. So let me focus on planning that in the beginning. I also realized the areas I was getting most nervous in weren't worth getting nervous about, right? The world was not going to end if I didn't remember a certain step in a method. And so kind of maybe reestablishing what what is that anxiety coming from? If I'm agitated and I look at a past event and think, all right, I was really agitated in this interview, I came across maybe angry or desperate. What did that result in? Well, it resulted in the subject, the interviewee, also becoming agitated and resistant. Maybe it resulted in getting information that wasn't as reliable because of how I came across. So reviewing past events can be important. Awareness, review past events. And then number 3 takeaway for us is pausing and reflecting. We spend a lot of time now in our new program, and hopefully you've all had a chance to attend in the last year or so, in both our criminal interviewing program and in our private sector. We spend time talking about strategic rapport development. And one of the main concepts here, which kind of comes from conflict resolution and de-escalation, is when somebody says something to us, before we just come back with some witty response that checks the ego box, are we pausing and reflecting on where did that interviewee, where did that emotion come from? If they said something like, hey, just get to the point, and we come back with some type of sarcastic response, well, you're going to see where I'm going in a second, with some attitude, clearly that's not going to help increase conversation or communication. If somebody says, get to the point, we need to understand that clearly they're impatient. Maybe time is of the essence. Maybe they're really concerned about what this conversation is about. There's a reason they have that worry. We need to empathize with that. If somebody says, well, I can't lose my job, right? For those of you that do organized retail crime investigations, if you apprehend a shoplifter and they say, well, I can't go to jail, and the first thing out of your mouth is probably, well, you shouldn't have been stealing in the first place. And that'd be a terrible response. But that's the pride, right? That's the ego that comes out. Instead, we have to pause and reflect. Well, I can't go to jail. We need to understand that somebody clearly has a fear of what's going to happen next. We need to understand where their emotions are coming from and how we can properly listen to it and respond. So 3 takeaways on emotional awareness. Number 1, be aware and aware of how that comes across to your interviewee. Number 2, review past events, which might help us strategize future events. And number 3, pause and reflect before we respond. Witty might be fun, but it's not necessarily productive. So sorry that our coffee break was a few days too late. I managed my emotions. Took me a few days to calm down before I got back on the camera. Hope to see you all in a seminar soon, and we'll see you again this Friday for another coffee break. Thanks.